This workshop. It is quite experimental. We won't necessarily have all the answers, and you will be doing lots of dowsing. And Sean here is going to assist and support and tell me when I've been completely unintelligible.
I'm the very unglamorous assistant.
We're going to be dowsing energies. Let me just talk you through what we're going to be doing. You've got props on the tables. What I am going to have to ask you to do is to remove any items apart from the plastic cups that you don't actually need on you, because otherwise it's going to interfere with what you're doing. So stick it on the floor, stick it behind you. You will need a pen. If you want to make notes, you can make notes, but when we're doing the actual dowsing around the cups, you will need to take most of the things off the table, otherwise it will interfere, and you'll see why when we do it. Yeah, let's move the screens. I'll just stick them all in my handbag and take them back.
Sugar.
Because boxes mints are made in Leicester, so they get bulk quantities of boxes. Right, but for those of you who don't know, I probably ought to explain that I see subtle energies out there, 3D touch field here. To me, they're incredibly vivid. They are, when I look at things, I can see all sorts of phenomena. So I will say that when I'm describing things, it's obviously how I see it. Obviously, everybody will see things differently. It's a very individual thing how people see, but we're all right. Because we all see something. So I can only talk about how I and other dowsers probably do see things with some form of coherence and agreement between us. Because, well, you'll see in a minute, won't they? How energies are so very alive, if you like. So what we're going to be doing, we're going to be looking at what you're all taught is the aura, and I'm going to break that down for you, because the aura isn't one thing. We're all taught to think it's one. Actually, every object emanates a variety of formations. So we're going to break those down into component parts so you can see more or less what they look like. And you're going to be drawing them out so you can see how they move as you down, so you'll plot them. We're then going to be looking at how you're playing with your cups and how those cups then talk to each other, and the quality of those lines and how it affects you. So how the built environment that man has made actually creates a hugely energetic, chaotic space that we have to live in, which you don't get in your natural environments. So we were having this conversation, weren't we? As we have built the manufactured environment, thinking we've got nice neat rows of everything, we've actually created energetic chaos. Whereas when you go into a rainforest, you have energetic harmony, but actually it looks quite chaotic.
Yeah.
So the perceived order is not an energetic order.
Yeah. So what Fay, I found it really enlightening is this paradox of, it's almost like trying to avoid chaos has driven us to chaos, but on an unseen level. And you know, when Fay's talking about what she sees,
We need that one. Don't touch us. Or you can go down into the other door at the bottom.
If you go
Yes,
so shooting me through here, so I do apologise for it.
that's quite all right. Trustees, you can always rely on.
So yeah, obviously as a dowser, I am compensating for my inability to see things, which Fay can do naturally. And I think, you know, dowsing is that interface between the clairvoyant and our own everyday experience. So it may be interesting the attempt between, you know, what Fay sees and then what we can plot and actually show on the paper. So that's what we're attempting to do. So there may be some dissonance between that. So just put your hands up and sort of ask us if there is a...
Yeah, there is a problem.
If there is a problem.
Because, say, I see, so it's easy, and this is very experimental. What this workshop hasn't got is a beginning, a middle, and a nice type end. It's got a beginning and a middle.
And a question.
And a question.
Yeah.
And hopefully this will enable you to go away and go, oh, I'm going to sit down tonight with my cruet set and have a little play at the table and see how they talk to each other. So that's basically what you're going to be doing with your 3 plastic cups. So, I haven't got a clicker. Right, so we often use this term energy, and yet we don't know what it is. I don't either. There is a kaleidoscope of shapes and forms out in the natural world that I see. It's like Mandelbrots and kaleidoscopes everywhere, constantly moving, constantly changing. I wouldn't want to pin that down to say it is one thing. There are many different forces involved in all those formations. So there's electromagnetism, there's electricity, there's magnetism, there's gravity, there's who knows, there's all sorts of forces that impact upon these things. But there is some similarity in the forms that they take. So there is a pattern to these objects. We're going to be looking at the aura because it's probably the one you're most familiar with. Everybody, all objects have some form of aura, whatever form that may be. And then we're going to look at how changes in those energies are created. So we might get up in the morning and our aura is one shape, 10 seconds later it'll be completely different because it's a constantly moving target. But certain changes are changes that you don't want. So you don't want to get nasty correlations of negative lines. Negative doesn't necessarily mean they're harmful, but if you get certain correlations of negativity, then it will become detrimental. So it's being much more aware of all these happenings that are going on around you as you move through our man-made world, as you move through your house, as you move through this furniture. What actually happens? Because you're not moving through empty space. So, and then...
Can I just say something there? Because what Fay made me realise is that we're very, as Dowsers, it's quite easy to douse the food that we eat, for instance, so we can really work that out, you know, maybe it's better to eat organic, etc. But then this is kind of another level of negotiating the objects of our world. It's like what objects are going to impact on us, and that really made me think. It's yeah, another form of what we put in our bodies.
Yeah. Hence the sacrificial banana.
Sacrificial banana.
And sacrificial apples.
Sacrificial.
Which you might not want to eat them at the end. So let's just get on to.
Sorry.
Oh, excuse me. The aura. So we're all taught that every object has an aura, which of course it does. We're often taught that it has this nice defined linear edge, and it's nice and round and all the rest of it. It's a bit more complex than that. Billy Gorm's probably done some of the best work on this as well. Could you just, my lovely assistant, just click to the next one? Right. What you're often not taught very much about is that you all walk down in a 3D cube as well. All those lines, you're sat in the middle of that as well as an aura. So everybody walks around with a giant cube of all these square lines that intersect one way and another. We talk about radials because we're very good at dowsing generally in the plan view. Everything's flat and on the floor. It isn't. When we talk about radials, of course, they don't just come out like here, they're coming out all around you in all directions, down and out and everywhere, so you look like a giant porcupine. So you can forget the grid, and then you could look at that instead. They're like different layers, so you have to focus on the right layer to see the right thing. All those little radials, that's not a very good example, but all these little radials that come out here all end in little terminating spirals. Up, down, whichever way the radial has perfected. So, you know, when people talk about what they often say to you, they often come to me and say, what does my aura look like? And I tend to go, it's a pinky mauve colour. Because you can't describe which bit of the aura they're referring to. You know, are you asking about your radials, you're asking about your grid, and then there's pictures that play in your aura, so you can see events that have happened in people's lives. There's all sorts of things that go on in it. So it helps to break down to know what the component parts are, because sometimes then you'll get very confused with your dowsing, because actually if you break the layers down and douse specifically that layer, if you know they're there, you can work out what you're doing. If you don't know they're there, you'll get really confusing results, because your dowsing will be dowsing all things at once, and you can't do that. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Yeah. It's like an onion, layers.
Next one?
Yeah, next one please. We'll get you dowsing there. Even more complicatedly, lines are all sorts of shapes. So you get dead straight lines that are anchored between, which is what we're going to be moving towards. You get sinuous lines that have gentle curves, they go around the landscape, they come off things that are different shapes. The serpentine is like a slinky. Ignore my illustration because it was a bit rusty, but it is like a slinky. So it goes round, and when they join up, of course, that's where you get your toroid. And they can be convoluted, and this is what we're going to be working on. That's a very poor example of a flower pattern that you're going to be working on with your cups in a moment. Right, next one, and then we'll get into it properly. Right, why are these lines there? Because they are everywhere. So everything gives off all these lines. It's like a matrix, a grid. They carry information, little packets of information, and information moves around all over the place. The results of these lines, you won't get lines out of certain crystals. They emanate a different thing, but they don't emanate lines. The lines come from disorder and chaos. So the more disordered and chaotic the structure, you tend to get more lines. And the form of how the line actually displays, whether it's straight, sinuous, serpentine, or convoluted, is based on the molecular structure of the object. So metal will give off one form, wood another, different metals, different things, how they're manufactured, all sorts of things. So a highly manufactured object, which most of our objects in the man-made world are incredibly disordered and chaotic. So they give off chaos. Whereas objects that are handcrafted, handmade, more natural, don't. So if you've got a wooden bowl created by a handmade person who has lovely made the wood, it won't give off negative radial lines. But one produced in a high-powered manufacturing centre, as John's gone through, that any thought, they're all identical, are chaos in their makeup, because there's no sort of involvement or thought or love really gone into it. There's no emotional input from us. So that's why we have made all these chairs and all these cups, which we're going to be using, are in effect a chaotic world. By their very nature, plastic is chaotic. Right, so if you work in pairs, I think it's the easiest way. Next slide. You need to get your cups. We do a demonstration at the front. You have 3 plastic cups. 1, 2, 3. Find the point, find the almond. I want you to space them out quite some distance. Don't have to be in a straight line, they can be all sorts of places. So when we talk about the aura, we tend to douse this outer line here as if it's a definitive line. Now, it isn't. When you look at people's energetic emanations, the energy starts out there and becomes denser as it comes in. You belong to your aura, not the other way around. So most of the energy, although it's going outwards, it just creates a more dense mass in the middle, which is you. But we're taught there's a defined edge, which obviously then there isn't. But continuous lines that we all give up, it is a geoglyph. It's doing this all the time. That line is constantly going around you, like a whirling dervish. But because it's one line, it has a beginning and an end. So what objects do when they get into proximity is the end of that line uncoils and it reaches out forlornly to the next object. Because it's needy.
No, I love this description. It's like when you get these cups, which is what we're going to do, is going to kind of put them into relationship with each other. It's kind of like they reach out for each other because they need the order that is inherent in the universe, I guess.
Yeah.
And whereas if you get crystals, they will, according to Fay, they will hug each other pretty much. They're unto themselves and contained structures. So they will interact, but in a more sort of huggy way.
It's a more huggy way. It's
rather
not
than
needy.
a grasping.
These things are needy and grasping.
Yeah, in a way, it's like they're unfinished, aren't they? And
They
they need to kind of find some way of finishing themselves. So that's kind of, in a way, will get you to douse their poor, needy arms as they grab each other. And I guess that's what we do as humans. The more chaotic we are, the more we need others.
One thing, it reminds me, there's this photos of the slow motion photos of where all the things that are like the peas and they're going out the string, and then they know there's another string and they start.
Yeah, they reach that little coil.
They reach out their little coils to get the other pole.
It's It's exactly that.
They know it's there somehow.
They know it's there, it's exactly that, that's
Yes.
exactly what they look like.
Yeah, so these things,
So
just
if
saying
you-
these things get to know the other ones there. And
They get to know the other ones there. So what they'll do is if we click on the next one,
Oh, yeah,
I'll give you a...
I'll just jump off mine.
Oh, no, yours, no, go back.
No, I'll do that a bit later.
Oh, all right then.
Yeah.
So what you've got is, even though I've drawn this up, for the sake of argument, you've got your three cups. At the moment, they are not talking to each other. So they're three distinct things with their radials and their grooves. There's nothing going on between them. So what we're going to do then is you're going to start moving them towards each other while you're dowsing.
Should we just say to douse the aura first?
Yes, sorry,
Yeah,
yes.
so just what you can do with your cup is just put your finger out however you normally douse an aura person, and just do it the same with your plastic cup. So with me, I'm just going to move my finger, put my pendulum in a kind of in a no until I get a yes, and whatever you might use a neutral, whatever it is you do. And then as I get closer, I'm picking up about there. I'm getting a yes just around there. So that is the bouncy edge, I guess,
That's
of
the bouncy
that
edge of the
line
geometry that's
that
doing
Fay
that.
was saying.
And we're just doing this with one cup.
One cup only, and
So
then
we're working in pairs.
yeah, you will be in a
This is
minute.
just the
but
beginning.
Just the beginning. Just at the moment.
Yeah.
Grab a cup.
Try
And the cup
two to
must
see
be
if
upside
you get the
down.
same.
Yeah, upside down's better, just because it's just not less. Not them over it. You're about to
Do you have to touch the cup to create the aura?
No, it's just
No, it's not.
every object in the universe.
It's matter. Yeah, it emanates.
So there's projects.
Though I've seen a few people that have learned these questions. Fun on here today, obviously. When you found the edge, I want you to sort of roughly draw around your cup with a pen or pencil, hence the paper, to say, this is roughly speaking where it is.
Oh, do you want to do that now or when there's three?
No, I think if they mark. Oh,
They're
no,
gonna be moving.
yeah, no, ignore that, you're right.
Yeah, I'll do it a bit later.
Do you think we could have more cups? Because we're trying to do, between three of us here, it's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, we've got plenty
yeah,
more
no
cups.
problem.
So just up there and then...
Yeah, and my arms won't move.
Could you, Alan,
Could you pass some cups?
oh, you're all right, you're all right so far.
Oh, you've got some.
We've got some, we've got some. We probably will be more cups actually, I think we've got some. We're working in threes of pair, I don't know what's bigger than I thought it was.
Yeah, there's some.
Because we can't draw a line on the table.
Okay, so you don't have to draw around it now.
You don't know about ignore, I said you don't have to go write it down, but, a rough estimate. You have found something, hopefully, around your cup. Has everybody had a reaction around the cup?
Yeah?
Yeah? You haven't picked it up?
It could be.
It is there, you're there. We'll make you go through it.
It's usually pretty close to them.
It's not too far away, it's pretty close to the cup, we're talking a couple of inches probably. But again, because there's no there's no exact edge, it just depends really how sensitive you are where you pick it up.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
what we have to say is,
It was different.
we want to find the one that Fay wants us to find, because I got one further out.
No, you haven't, you got, like I said, it just gets thinner as it goes out, so when does your mind start picking up?
Yeah. Sorry.
In essence, the only important thing is consistency for yourself.
I've got it.
Not
Sorry.
consistency for everybody else.
Say a couple of inches, there's my cup, mine seems to be here.
Yeah, fine. I think.
Okay.
Sorry. Yes.
They said a couple of inches, this is
No,
further
that's
away.
only, yeah, as I said, there's no exact edge, you're trying to find something that sort of just gets weaker.
Yeah.
So it's a field almost that gets weaker the farther away you go from the object. So your level of sensitivity is just when you pick it up. That's the only difference. There is no right or wrong answer to that. You're all right. So what happens then when we start? At the moment you've got three distinct objects that are existing in isolation. They are not talking to each other, hopefully. But what happens is, Sandra was saying, it's exactly like the peas uncoiling. When you start to move them together, the energy of the glyph starts to uncoil and it reaches as a little grab. They reach for each other. So that's one object and that's the other. So what you will get is something that looks like that. So what we want you to do now is to move, if you work in pairs, you've got 3 cups.
Yeah, so this is what I did from what Fay told me before, is to leave one as your central cup, which doesn't move. So that's like your pivot in the middle. Yeah, and 2 of you, or if there's, can you do this with 4? I don't know. Or you can just try it in your 3s if someone, you can pull it back and do it again. It's like as I go towards the middle, I'm not really getting an interaction there. I'm in my no again, or neutral. And then as I come forward, I'm just dowsing to see if there's any interaction between those cups. And I'm starting to get it around there. That's the sort of point at which they're interacting. And then with that one, you can do it with your seeing it. There.
It literally, they change over millimetres. It literally is that fine.
So in which case, the fact that you had it spinning on no, and whereas without anything different, that you know you
we know what we're doing.
Right, so we'll be trying this
Oh, that is a shame.
This lady wasn't dowsing at all, so... I'll just lend in my pendulum.
Yeah, you've got one.
I've got some rods.
It's just the same.
I don't even It's going to reach out.
Back and forth. You guys want to just do that interactive and see what to communicate with us? So if you go by the method,
You don't even need to know the
and you just imagine just a bubble. Like your body's just in a neutral state until the point when you hit it and then it just goes yes. I just use my hand until I make sure I can get it. I'll do it on you. Stay there.
Right, okay. Keep requiring cups every time.
So it's like finding a horse. You can do it whilst
Okay, so have we got obviously to be cups waving at each other in a very easy and emotional way? Great. Right. Now what happens when you get to the straight line? Just click.
Don't we need to do them? People drawing the.
Oh gosh, yes. Sorry. Oh, do you mind?
No, you do it because it's yours.
Right. What I'd like you to do, if you found your hook, don't worry about it too much. I want you to draw where it comes out of the cup.
So what you can do is just like with your finger, we did with the finding the cup coming into contact. Is just it's like doing a map dowsing really. You're just starting on one edge of the paper and moving it in until you get a hit, a yes, or a little tendril, a little pea tendril coming off. Make a mark, and then what you can do is do another one here, make another mark, and then you can kind of start to draw between the marks. Yeah, and you can do the other side as well, because there's probably another tendril coming around the other side as well.
We're focusing on the link between one cup and the other two, or
The outer cup to the middle cup.
Do the outer cup to the middle cup. Keep it simple. Don't worry about anything else. Do the outer cup to the middle cup, or whatever you do. Do it to each individual. So let me try and
you're very close.
Okay.
it's not as close as that, isn't it?
I was watching, see the bar, see the bar.
Please tell me.
So I just
That's right, and it had back in, yeah.
So just pull it out with the interacting. You just need any space.
Please tell me. No, and then you come that way, or do I say no, tell me, and then you come yes?
It's entirely up to you. I'm not what I do.
Yeah.
No. Until I get a yes.
I'll try to say no.
You might want to do it between. Sure.
So with a bit of red tendrils, where it is.
Let's do
So there are two ways, you either say, please tell me, and then you say yes, or please, no, it's mark. You go back and forth to the other
Is that a yes?
What it does, it goes to where you
And what you do is then you do it.
there might be a trace of where you've been. Is that right?
Yes, so you're right.
Go back onto it.
So yours was thrown out from there, was it?
Yeah.
Just well, you guys are all right. We're absolutely fine.
Now then, you can change the space on it. Take your time, don't worry.
So what, if you continue to get these here, we will do it at the moment. There's you start to move before and that starts to, that jargon, that spring, if you like, starts to unwind. When they get to this point, so they start to these two, it starts to
I distracted myself. Sorry. Yeah, he did do that, yeah.
Yeah.
He did do it, he did do that.
So roughly speaking.
And I've got the feeling of a sort of curve there.
Yeah, I mean it's different every time you do it because they're in a different position. So the curves just follows now, one feels like a curve follows this.
So do we actually mark this then?
Yeah, so let's say
So again, in minor thoughts.
for sake of argument, there you go. So, in reality, the end.
And you can actually see
Yeah.
Yes.
and
Yes, there's all sorts of
Oh, there's a
focusing on that bit, so I don't see everything else as well.
Yeah.
I can't see
That's where
it.
that goes down.
Most people can't.
Yes.
So
I've kind of felt it, because I've got
yeah, he's just making points.
British church we try out
Yeah.
stuff. Thin as this, you know.
And then you draw the line that you've got.
Well, everybody senses in different ways, all these senses are involved, I just have to be very sight.
So,
Right, okay, so have we all got,
I think they need a bit more time.
do you need a bit more time?
So yeah, when you made your dots, join them up and make the line between the two.
the connection to that,
Yeah.
got moved.
So you're connecting those two.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Just well, you guys connected, and just because of the connection with them. You've done. Gee.
That's
Intention.
Right. Okay, what's a timing? We're gonna have to move on. Now, what happens when you get your objects are now talking to each other? The really interesting things happen is when you find there's a critical point where they will all link up and talk to each other. So if you get your three cups, there's a critical distance with mass when they're apart. And if they're not, they mustn't be. The more sharp-witted amongst you will notice that they are not in a dead straight line because the line does not go through the centre of that one. When you put three objects in alignment, if you think about photos of the pyramids yesterday, there's three pyramids and they are not in a straight line. You get three objects, and they get. Let me line it up so I can see. Right, so. Those three now they don't have a gyroglyph going around them. There is just one solid line that goes from that one to that one to that one. They are not quite in a dead straight line. Therefore, you will have this line of energy between them. Do we need to do that next? Yes. So, what you will need to do is find, there's a bit of a subtle clue going on there on the table, the critical distance between your objects for that line to be created. One of them must be about 3 degrees off straight. You'll find it when they are not quite straight. So even when you look at the landscape, you look at lines going across the landscape, because of the distance, they look straight. They will never be quite exactly straight.
Do you have to have three objects together, or surely two?
Two will talk, but the thing that we're moving on to is why we need the three.
Can I say, as well as the two curvy lines there, they seem to be connecting to me.
Yeah, they will be.
Yeah, straight from me to each one, not through the middle. I get so sort of straight from the centre of me.
Yeah.
They're going also.
Yeah, you will.
like
There are
that.
lots of other things going on. I want you to ignore that. Just
All right.
focus on the one, because otherwise we'll start talking about. Yeah, we're all talking to each other. There are lines crisscrossing this room all over the place. So for your dowsing to be focused, you need to be looking for that one line. Otherwise, you'll get reactions going all over the place, and you won't know what they are.
So just to say that there's this kind of mystery that seems to happen with three things.
Yes.
So Fay described this to me, and you don't really know why it collapses. And I was talking to Jim, who I worship, but he was saying that
Lions, yeah.
I'm a bit of a fanboy. Yeah. And he was saying that the problem of three is an age-old problem. Like in terms of gravity, it becomes a problem. And this, I think you noticed it when what's her name, Frankie? Sylvia Frankie was doing the lecture. She talked about the eclipse, and there you have three things in direct alignment. And at that point, when they shook the water and gave it to the plant, there was no growth. And that seems to be what's happening here. If you get three things, disordered things in alignment, but obviously they're ordered things, they're planets, something collapses, and energy is then more detrimental to us as human beings. And
So
that's what we're going to look at next.
So what happens when we get an eclipse? Obviously, we have the sun, the moon, and the earth in complete alignment from our perspective, whichever way around, whether it's a solar or lunar eclipse. What happens at that point in time is every single ley line drops off the grid. It's gone. And what I'm interested is it doesn't just collapse. The bit that I'm trying to work out is it creates almost like a kind of void, which we were experimenting with earlier on. So if you think back to ancient times, the prediction of eclipses was incredibly important, and people were killed for getting it wrong. Now, if you have a people that are used to working with these energetic realms, let's say you're off, you're actually projecting, when an eclipse occurs, you're an important sailor, you're an important person. If you didn't get that right, that person is gone. What happens is it pulls your energy field into this kind of void. Now, I don't know where it goes, I have no intention of jumping into it to find out. But what we're going to create is you're going to get your cups in an alignment, and we're going to then get them very straight and collapse the energy between them and look at that gap that it creates.
Yeah. So in order to do that, you want to again work from the central one, I would say.
I would say work from the central one.
And then move the others until you can do it by sight, obviously, but you also want to do it with your pendulum. So at the point at which you feel as though it's going to collapse, or creates this really straight line, and the fields collapse, then you're just asking for a simple yes. Is that what's happening? Obviously, it's going to take some cooperation.
Mention the 3 degree.
It just
from Detroit.
3 degrees. We don't know. It's just it just is. It's like fly and pipe. They just are. And if you have, which we're going to put people on in a minute, if you have these chairs they're slightly off, you will get that line. Once they become mathematically perfectly in line due to their mass and the distance, then it collapses. It just goes, and there is something else that isn't in its place, and that's the thing I'm interested in.
So when you're queuing for the bus, you might want to just take a little step
to the side. Which is actually why people's auras do collapse in queues. When you get people of a body mass of a particular type, and there's 3 of you in a queue, you can feel really awful because your energy actually starts to collapse.
Yeah,
and watch people's auras just go because they're in a line of 3.
Too much order makes you sick.
So that's why I don't queue, I just jump. Straight up. It's not healthy. Yeah, so I'm thinking about, we're obsessed with having everything perceived as neat and orderly. So, desks and cubicles and offices and exactly the same place. We've got like we have alignments right the whole time. Actually, so what we perceive as visual order creates energetic chaos. It's really, you've got this, it must be it's incredible. Yeah, so you've got your visual order, and then you get them talking to each other.
You can just bounce straight yes or no whether they.
So you said there's a line between that one and that. Now we've broken
Yeah, if you get your so if you like, if you're going over a street water, if you zigzag over gaps between them, you should get a reaction. If it goes all the way across, you should get a continuous. You move your finger on your pendulum, so it gets some motion in it. It doesn't. If it, what you want is it to say, as you move the finger forward, yes, it's there. No, it's not. Yes, it's there. No, it's not. Yes, it's there. And that way you will know. Yeah, there's a nice line from there to there to there. You don't need to know, just you want a yes response when your finger goes over and energy that is communicated. You don't have to be exact in the question format. It's actually
You've done it, got it. Fantastic.
Daddy knows what he's doing.
just once you've got it, you've got it.
So, we've got to find a line.
Are you saying it was 3 degrees?
Yeah, well,
When it went
that's what we say.
Yeah,
So it's like when
Well, no, I just said if you move, if people have difficulty knowing that there is a definite line, if you zigzag your finger across, it will go on, and then you'll know that there's there if you want to do it that way. Yes, it's there, and then you know if you read like that, you've got to tell it. But it doesn't actually have the space thing. There's some integrated line here. It is actually down to physics and do that in actual teams. But you can pay at home, you can time and then you can, I've played for hours with a set on the table, and then you know, and find what you do, then you can move them into your play triangles, you can find the portions in a triangle, and you can draw them all up. It's wonderful lines. Right, okay, so you've got your cups and they are talking to each other. 3 in a row is better because you only need 3 to collapse. So what I want you now to do is you need to we'll do 1 cup at one end. If you, because pick, you know, although there's a line going between the 3 of them, you know, if it's basically you've got to go now down just to get them in this dead straight line because you can't see what's going on between them. So you'll have to. Have they collapsed it?
Yeah.
Most of you, yeah. Some of them it's not. I've got lines down this side, so there is lines in that one down there. So what you want to do now is you move your cup so they're an exact. You can do it by eye if you like. What is an exact straight line? Exactly. So move 1. We've done it.
So many different things.
We have a dichotomous opinion here. My right says
They're still there.
Out on the left. To that way. Well, 5
the one thing.
Put them in a straight line behind you, between them is line. So this line that we created when they were
it's just the basics.
now we've got them in a straight line of 3. The energy that was between them and correlating between them is now collapsed. So the line is not reaching out.
No, there's something else that you so you're going to react to you. Complicated. There's no energy. Right. Now this gets a little bit mentally taxing. When you've got, we had 3 objects, not quite in a straight line, and we had a line of energy that ran through 3 objects. When you put them in perfect straight line alignment, that form of energy line collapses. It doesn't necessarily mean you won't get a dowsing reaction of there being something between the 2, because there is, it's something else. Right, so the actual energy line that you've just been dowsing has just ceased to function. It like retracts coils back up. What I'm interested in now is this, when you have an eclipse or when you have lines in perfect alignment, there is this other form or some kind of voidal form that we were playing with earlier on that you were putting your hand in, that sort of draws energy into it, but it's kind of like a vacuous space is the best way I can describe it. So, what's the best way of doing this? Hands?
Well, I think, yeah, so if I say that it's detrimental to our health.
Basically.
Yeah. So when we can't interact with it, and this is the same when you pick up the cup, we were just dowsing the etheric body, and Fay was seeing it. My etheric body goes down as soon as I pick up a plastic cup in my hand. So my health is just eroded that little bit just as I pick up a plastic cup. With this alignment, when it's suddenly you're in a row, then just the row is detrimental as well. So when you put your hand here between them, your energy will start to go down.
So if you hold your hand out away from the cups, let's just give your etheric body a percentage rating. Let's all say you are up to 100% for the sake of argument. Put your hand in the gap and douse the percentage of etheric body that is around your hand.
Just to give you a little, this is maybe too much for you, but that you want to do. But what I look at a lot is the elements. And thorium, I douse by percentage. So, for instance, my thorium levels right now in my aura are about 86%. So it's not perfect, but it's not bad. And that usually gives me then a kind of sense of how far my aura goes out as well. I'm protective aura, that sort of bubble. And so if you want to do this as a percentage, what you can do is do the thorium levels of the hand as it comes into contact in between the cups. And also what we can do at some point is we need to get these chairs in alignment, but we can sit someone in a chair and see what happens when
Three willing victims.
3 willing victims to be placed in the chair, and then we can douse them. The other levels are lutetium, another element, for the etheric body. And the etheric body is like, as you saw it, is like it's another me, basically, or another you, just outside of this one.
It's sort of blown up.
Yeah.
Enlarged and thinner. Enlarged in size, it looks to me, it looks a lot like you. It's as if someone's taken a bigger photograph and put it around you.
And you don't have to use the elements at all. You can just ask, what's the health of the etheric body of my hand? And if I do it now, it's 100, it's 93, but as it's coming to here, it's starting to change. And as I put it in between, 100, 90, 80, it's more like 60% all of a sudden. So this is the thing, like you want to look out for repetitions of things and straight lines of things and
bollards, the argument. Anything, you can practice finding these sort of voidal spaces, which I'm quite interested in, because there isn't much done on this. They talk about the energy collapse as if then there's an absence of energy. There is an absence of that energy, but there's definitely something else. What is that something else?
The nameless energy.
Yeah.
There's an energy, but
we
don't know how to name it.
We don't know how to name it. It's almost like it's almost like looking at a negative. To me, it's almost like everything is suddenly reversed within that space. So rather than giving out energy, it sucks it in instead. So it's a strange thing.
So yeah, if you want to try that with each other, it's just you can just ask the health of the etheric body of the hand as it's going into the spaces, and you can douse each other or yourself, whichever.
I'm just asking loss of energetic integrity.
Yeah, it's a loss of energetic integrity. Yeah, you start to crumble.
It's whatever question.
My first results, I was getting 82%. More than that.
It has it can have quite a dramatic effect. You don't want to get wasted up,
Another interesting. We're experimenting.
I'll say that we don't necessarily have. I certainly don't have the answers to this many things. But I wanted to experiment with people to know that it wasn't a phenomenon that was just like, you know, if we get a group of people and you're finding it, it's something worth investigating. Yeah.
Have you got any here? Have you taken any?
Yeah.
Did everyone find a drop in alcohol?
Yes. Did anybody feel anything in the hand of your ground and achy wrist? Did anybody feel anything? Just out of interest? Yeah.
I had a sense of something that I couldn't put words to.
Yeah. I was just saying it's just now. I said it's like if you look at the work of Bohm, you've got the implicate and explicate order. So you've got the physical world that we perceive, and then you've got the other that makes the physical matter, this universal force where everything is in potential, if you like. It's almost like it's a way of getting into that. It creates, it's like a wormhole, it sort of creates a doorway from what we perceive to be the physical world into the other. Because we were talking about, although your etheric body collapses, the energy of your astral body actually raises.
And I'd forgotten that because that was the one that I found changed going up. And what's her name? Sorry.
Linda and Kate.
Linda and Kate. Yeah,
they found the same thing.
They both found that the astral body had gone up as well, whereas there was this other collapse. So you're almost getting a more universal experience suddenly happening. The personal has dropped away, the personal aura and the personal etheric body, and something bigger has happened.
Maybe it creates a portal.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that's what I was thinking.
Because there's no energy there, there's other space.
There's other space, it's that other space that
What's in that other space?
What's in that other
Access
space?
to the astral.
to the astral, to all those kind of
Takes
things.
your personal out of the picture.
Yeah, which is what I was saying, is that if people were astrally projecting when eclipses occur, it's been known that people just haven't come back. They just go, oh, there's no link. So that's what we're saying about why it was so important to predict eclipses, because if people were actually projecting or within that realm at that time, there is no method for them to return home.
So it's just something for a particular matter then, in a physical body.
Yeah. So you're away, you're gone. Yeah, what a way to go.
You know what? You know Star Trek. You know the transporter pass when it says "Beam me up, Scotty." Do you think that will ever happen? Yeah.
Of course it does.
It's
We're all the
happening.
time.
It's happening already, I think, by certain experiments.
You hear a lot about these gurus, particularly in India, sort of bilocating, suddenly being somewhere else, or in two places at once.
Well, yes, I've had. Yeah.
And I think the technology we're dealing with dowsing is etheric technology, and really in that kind of, and this is slightly different, like from the etheric body, but that kind of earth, air, fire, water, etheric. Time and distance and space doesn't play the same role. So you can step into that and then step out of it somewhere else. So.
Yeah. But I think having especially created pads, like the do in the story, that anyone can stand on and do that.
Maybe.
If you look at the work of the people who took Tesla's work on, there's a guy called Ring, and he talks about things like that happening exactly like that.
Oh, right.
They also had a little pad. These are different pads, but Tesla always made this kind of joke when people came in and get them to stand on this pad, and they poo themselves. So that's a different thing. I'm saying that. Be careful what pad you step on.
The different bodies upon one another, are they all very separate? Or could you have, for example, the health of an aura at, let's say 90%, but the health of the Hefet at 60%?
Yes.
You could. So
yeah.
And
they occupy almost in the same space.
Yeah.
They're connected to you, But they're independent.
They are?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll give you an example.
So
of
do
that.
one-
It's like my fingers, they're connected to me, but they're all independent, aren't they? You know, they don't all have to move together.
So one doesn't influence the other?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Depends on what the issue, it depends on what's happening
I'm
with
thinking
you.
of health, if you're dowsing somebody for health.
Well, an example of that is if you've had an accident, if someone's had an accident or car crash, what you see is there's a bad impact.
Yeah.
Their etheric body will be low in certain places. Say they got whiplash or they hit their head on the head, you can find that the etheric body is low. And that in essence is because that's the blueprint for the physical body.
Right.
But
When
it
it's
won't
dead-
necessarily mean your astral body's low because
No.
you're still here and you're all, you know, you've
Of
survived.
course.
But
I
sometimes
understand.
your aura will be low in that place as well.
Yeah,
Whereas other times it won't.
okay.
Yeah, it's not always.
That's clarified nicely.
So are we saying
It's another state of confusion.
we're saying with our perception of reality, which we have through our 5 normal senses, plus our enhancement of that through dowsing with our perception about the etheric body, when you get to this portal, your astral body can go beyond that into some other
Yes.
undowsable sort of.
There's some
Or
other
maybe
So another
other
one.
things can pop through it.
Or maybe other things can go the other way,
Judgment, which you don't necessarily.
which you don't necessarily want. Yeah.
Can I ask, is what we've just experienced with the astral body, would that be what is sometimes described as dissociation?
I think potentially, yes. But there are lots of ways of becoming disassociated with your astral body, life, all the sort of things that we go through as a human being. The human condition can, shock, trauma, mental illness, all sorts of things can disassociate us
That's what I'm thinking
from our astral body.
Would it
I
be...
was strange enough, I was talking about mental illness earlier on, that the emanations, people with physical conditions have a certain emanation. Mental conditions, mental health have really a huge plethora of energetic emanations that can, and detached bodies of not quite being in alignment and all sorts of things. That we become totally disconnected with all elements of self.
Yeah.
So there's no base points to come back to.
But I'm just wondering if this experience actually then takes us into that place where bodies start to split.
I think it potentially could. Yeah.
I mean, what Fay was also saying is that it's a bit like what she sees is very much like what happens to the cup. It's lots of tendrils reaching out with people who are feeling chaotic or disordered. And with some people, it's a kind of reaching out up there somewhere. Isn't it?
Yeah, with some certain mental conditions, like we all throw out radials and reach out to people like energy vampires. All their radials suddenly come around the front and hug into you, and you can't get away. With certain people with, I won't say all, but certain mental illnesses, every radial literally points up to the heavens. So the whole lot is reaching up to what? They're not really in this moment, in here and now. They're somewhere else.
It sounds like you're talking about more psychotic illness.
Yes, psychotic conditions have really most amazing emanations, forms and structures.
Okay.
I know a lady who is very mentally ill, and she says that her soul has been stolen. And I says, well, that's impossible. Everyone's got a soul.
Well, I mean, that's the work of shamans for thousands of years has been to bring pieces of their souls back, whatever that means to them. And steal souls and soul fragments getting lost somewhere in past lives or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Well, she meant she was all right till early this year. Then something happened. I don't know.
It'd be hard to,
There's
so many factors involved in
this
that.
way you need to protect yourself when you're dowsing. Or on phones.
So when you get a forest to completely go away from where they plant trees in straight lines.
Yeah, I mean, plantations aren't too bad. They're not a natural environment, but the trees, do the best they can. You don't get it. You wouldn't get it between every tree because the mass of the tree is different, and then some of them grows quite often. they will try and grow slightly often, all sorts of things. So it's particularly prevalent in our man-made environment because we like to build things in nice square boxes and nice straight alignments because it looks very nice. But you go into the natural world, you know, there's hardly, the straight lines are only a short distances. Everything is curving, moving, bending, flowing, and we don't. We've gone into hard, rigid, straight formations. So yeah, as I said, there is no actual end point. It's a case of just go away and play and think about your environment slightly differently. You know, in terms of like Feng Shui principles, the less clutter and the less stuff you've got around your house, the better. But actually, you know, you can have a lot of inadvertent alignments that aren't necessarily helpful. You know, straight line alignments don't have to be detrimental to your health. It's as if it's a negative lines lined up and all sorts of things. But a good book to read, we'll talk about Billy Gore's work, a good book to read is Billy Gore's book, Beyond the Far Horizon. He sees energies very similar in some respects to how I do. And he'll talk about the particular formations and how things arise. So if you want to know more, I would highly recommend his book.
Sorry.
Billy Gore, Beyond the Far Horizon. Yeah.
Except Fay doesn't see.
No, he doesn't see the way I do.
He doesn't see, he gets frequency.
Yeah. Whereas I
Which
see.
is an interesting thing, is that he doesn't see with his eyes.
No.
Only he can actually, the waves come in, so it doesn't like,
Yeah.
it's not like colour.
Well, no, I mean, everything I would describe as a wave, most things are a wave and they're moving. So.
That's cool. It's really cool.
GAW.
He founded, he started the Earth Energy Specialist, which feels amazing now. He's out in Northern Ireland.
So just going to say as well that there are certain things which, like I just took some of the groundwater from Jeremy in there, just to kind of just have a look at the aura of the water itself, because if we come to that, it's somewhere out there, and the normal, you know, tap water you're going to get is going to be there. So those kind of interactions, if you want to break them up, there are obviously certain things. This is, you know, what he says is this is very ordered water. So it has a very coherent structure. So if we're drinking that, our coherence goes up as well. And you know, that I think, you know, what I've taken from Fay's work is this difference between chaos and order. They're not necessarily what we think they are. On an energetic level, it's a whole different ballgame. And we were talking about what in a natural state, and then coming to as humans working with our environment, we've always known what a natural state is, and then somewhere we forgot. You know, we just forgot what it feels like to be in a wholesome condition. Otherwise, we wouldn't make rooms like this. You know, and even just when Willem was talking about the Saqqara hospital, the waves that they put on the roof, not to generate a straight line. Again, it seems ordered, and yet it leads to too much noise, too much chaos. So we have to throw in these naturally occurring shapes in order to give us some peace. So look out for your IKEA
There's a
furniture.
question about that, because if you have too much order, very German water, that creates a
Not very German.
It's
Austrian.
Australia.
But it's
all rainbow colours.
But
It doesn't have the invisible colour.
I think if you look at sort of the chaos you can create, it makes the sacred geometry of buildings seem much more relevant, that they are doing the exact opposite that this is doing. Yeah, and we haven't got time, but you could then practice putting your 3 cups in a phi triangle. So find the sacred proportions, and the energy emanations that you would be able to douse from them are absolutely phenomenal. That yes, you get each one will emit 3 lines, they will talk to each other. There's all sorts of other stuff going on as well, and it feels brilliant. So when we started to come in from our world that we started to manipulate, so if we lived out in huts and everything was hunky-dory and start to make our man-made environment, we had to develop sacred geometry, create spaces for that society that kept us well and kept us in tune with everything. And we've just forgotten over time and built tower blocks and nice great buildings and put all our car parking in exact rows and, you know, line everything up nice and neatly. But actually for us, it doesn't work. doesn't work at all.
When you have three objects, they're all obviously all the same, aren't they?
Yeah.
But if we had, you know, a couple of saucer there, a bottle of wine here, so it's all going to be different, right?
It's all going to be different. It's to do with the mass and the makeup of an object. So it's like the mass and the distance is dependent on those. So I say, if you go home and play, you can play with a mug, you know, a bottle of vinegar and a, you know, a spoon, you know, and you can play with what the critical alignments are. And play with finding the good ones. All this feels really good. And then if you measure it, you'll often find that you're in a pyro-phi ratio.
Yeah.
So, you know, those ratios then become incredibly important. So, yeah, go away and play. It's just important to, you know, realise that you're walking through this all the time. There are no empty spaces. You know, it's just whether you want it to be well or not.
Do you think that something like, say like oil, say like olive oil, if you keep it at home, say like in a plastic bottle, if I bought it in, whereas compared with a glass bottle, which I would regard as much more natural, would you say that the oil in the plastic bottle is perhaps not quite as nutritious for you?
You would douse. You get one in a glass bottle and douse its level of nutrition, and then put some in a plastic container and douse its level of nutrition.
I will.
Lots of food packaging is, you know, it's not good for them. You know, they talk about food products in food technology. You know, food is a product. An apple is a complete product. It doesn't need messing with. It comes in a skin. You get rid of the core. It's biodegradable. It's the perfect product. And we mess around with things, putting it in plastic and cellophane, and you know, handling it and putting them through, you know, shipping them, and you know, our world is not.
And wearing synthetic clothes. Not as good as polyester as wearing cotton wool.
Unfortunately, we never got time to do the 3 chairs. We'll have to make sure we have victims later because it is lunchtime.
Yeah, you can do that next.